For the record, we are at Charlevoix Public Library in Charlevoix, Michigan. This is Tuesday, November 20th, 2007. We are working on the Charlevoix Oral Traditions Project. Videographer Rick Pierpont and interviewer Judith Ivan, who is the Assistant Adult Services Librarian at the Charlevoix Public Library. What month and day were you born?
September the 8th, 1919.
Whereabouts did you live in Charlevoix? What townships? City or townships?
At first we lived in the city. We built the house at 210 Burn Street, right behind Don's IGA.
Okay.
And then we were there for about 10 years. Then we moved out to Pine Point for 6.5 years, and then we moved to the present house on Carson Avenue. We've been there over 40 years.
For the record, this is Tuesday, November 20th, 2007. We're at the Charlevoix Public Library with the Charlevoix Oral Traditions Project, and Rosalyn Goldstick is here with us to share her Charlevoix memories of the post-World War II time period. And would you tell us about when you came to Charlevoix, Rosalyn? You said you came as a bride?
Right. I had met my husband when he was stationed at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, which was about a half an hour from Atchison, where I lived. And the USO, United Service Organization, had formed a young women's group called the GSO, Girls Service Organization. And so we had busloads of young women going to Fort Leavenworth once a week from each of 5 towns. And we put on plays, church programs, socials, ice cream socials, played board games like Monopoly and so forth, sang around the piano, anything to help relieve them of their lonesomeness. And we put on dances. This was all held at the YMCA there at the Fort Leavenworth. And we were very strictly supervised and chaperoned. We were not supposed to be dating the men, but they found ways to hitchhike to our various towns. And so I was introduced to my husband, former husband, or future husband, I should say, by a mutual friend, and we struck it up and we danced, and he finally found his way to Atchison a number of times, and we dated and decided we were definitely in love, and didn't feel that we should get married until after the war, because at that time there were no furloughs, and we knew he would be going overseas. So we waited until he came back from the South Pacific after 22 months, and we were still in love. We'd been writing all that time, and we decided that this definitely was for us. So I came up on my vacation. He said, I've been almost all around the world, and there's no place to live except Charlevoix. And if you won't live in Charlevoix, then we won't get married. So love prevailed, and I was here, and I looked the town over. At that time, of course, it was just a summer resort. There was no industry here. Things were were shut down during the winter. We didn't even have a laundromat then. And I was very doubtful about it, but I thought this was for me, so I did, and I've been very, very happy since with all the progress that Charlevoix has made. And I'm just really proud to live here now.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, you have written a book of poetry called Do You Remember? And I thought it would be nice if you might read us some of your poems and then comment a little bit further about it. And one that struck me to start off with would be The Old Drugstores on page 14.
All right. I didn't know just which ones that you had in mind, but this is great. Right. Do you remember the old drugstores? Do you remember when a soda fountain was the thing, and to buy a Coke your girlfriend you'd bring? Fessenden Drugstore made a Jeff with real ice cream, mixed with marshmallow and chocolate fudge. Oh, what a dream. They mixed it with a wooden paddle. 'Twas so very thick, and now no one can remember their famous trick. F.S. Meyer's store had a fountain too, and Central Drugstore too. So you had to take turns because it was the thing to do. Ice cream sundaes with lots of nuts on top. You could eat them all day till you thought you'd drop. They had a little mixer that beat up a great malt. You might gain weight, but that wasn't their fault. There were fountain cokes with a spritz of cherry syrup or lime. You could spend a good hour there for only a dime. There were chocolate cokes, vanilla cokes, or green rivers too. Drinks were made to order by the soda jerk, just for you. For coffee hour, the office people would all gather there to visit over a cup of good Java, the best anywhere. You could meet your friends there for an hour or so, and everybody came in, all the people you'd know. It became a hangout for guys and gals and their friends, but they'd buy one Coke, and no more could they spend. Then the owners found that people stayed longer and longer, and their amount of money was not growing stronger. So most soda fountains were closed down. Oh, what a pity to lose those great soda fountains in our little city.
Well, I remember those from when I was a kid, and I really enjoyed them.
They were very special, and as I say, it was definitely a hangout for the office crowd, for coffee or Cokes or whatever, and for ice cream. We didn't have the ice cream places that we do now in town. Murdoch's wasn't there yet, and the Dairy Queen wasn't here yet. So you went to the drugstore for your ice cream cone for a dime, and that dime was precious because money was very scarce.
Oh, another one that I thought would be interesting would be number 17, horse-drawn milk carts, page 17.
Okay. Do you remember the horse-drawn milk carts? Do you remember in days of old when Michigan winters were oh so cold? Long before many of you were born, Larry Eklund drove milk carts all around each morn. He came home from the armed services and he needed a car, but the dollars then were few and far. He wanted a dairy business to start, so he got a horse and he bought a small cart. When you were sleeping at 4 or 5 a.m. each day, the horse-drawn cart would come your way. The horse knew the way, and each house he would stop, and on quiet mornings you could hear his clippity-clop, clippity-clop. Larry left the glass bottles of milk and cream, and butter and eggs. 'Twas no dream. Sometimes the milk would freeze, and the cream at the top would push out the paper cap, and then it would pop. Quite different from now, when we must go to the store and buy a half-gallon or possibly more. But it's not as fresh, and we miss the personal touch of Larry Eklund and his horse, who all loved us so much. And this was my first winter, the second winter, and I would be up feeding my baby at that time of the day and hear him come by. I went out one morning to get the milk and hear the cream was coming clear up at the top. And I thought something was wrong. I had never seen anything like this because we had never had a milkman in our house before. And my husband came home and I said, I don't dare use that milk because it must be spoiled with that something up at the top. I don't know what it is. And he said, oh, it's just the cream off the top. That was before we had the homogenized milk. And so you had cream about this much at the top of each bottle, and when it froze, it just pushed right up. So he assured me that it was fine and I could drink it. He was used to having milk delivered, but we had always bought ours at the grocery store at home.
In Kansas. Yeah.
Right.
The next one I thought would be good would be page 44. And that's about the Iceman.
Right. Do you remember the Iceman cometh? Do you remember when they cut blocks of ice and it was delivered by the iceman, so nice? The ice was cut from our own frozen lake as large blocks of ice they would saw and make. They stored it away in a sawdust ice house all summer, for if it got hot and melted, oh, what a bummer. So they'd cut enough blocks the whole summer to last, And really, while working, they had quite a blast. It employed more men. There were not many jobs here, and as you know, money and jobs were very dear. So the ice house came a memento, you see, for what seemed to us then an eternity. The ice truck could be seen going all over town. The kids ate slivers of ice as he made his rounds. No electric fridges in each kitchen, oh no. To each home the iceman would have to go. A card in each window showed how much ice they'd need, so the iceman would know as each card he would read. The card was turned to show 10, 20, 30, and 50. And who devised the system? We didn't know, but it was quite nifty. You could request the ice in 20 or 30-pound chunks. A black rubber apron he wore as he carried the hunks. It was really just like a big rubber sack, and the ice would melt and drip down his back. Big ice tongs picked up the blocks, you see, as he carried each block for you and me. Big muscles he developed as he worked on the job, but there was always time for him to hobnob. Under the ice box was a pan for ice to melt and drain. To empty the pan each day was really quite a pain. But if you forgot and it overflowed, you mopped up the floor with every rag that you owned. Oh, what a blessing when Frigidaires were new. They were worth every penny that they might cost you. No water dripping all over your kitchen floor, no emptying the ice pans, no, never more. But you missed the cheery voice, and you missed his smile, for the iceman was gone. Not even once in a while would you buy ice from him now. He was replaced by the fridge. Did you miss the cleanup? Not even a smidge. How long we remembered, how soon we forgot. The era of the wooden icebox now lives not. For electricity played a big part in our lives after that. So to the inventor of the fridge, please take off your hat. Yes, I remember clearly emptying the ice pan. We had rented an apartment while we were still building our house, and sometimes I would forget to empty it because I would be busy, and I'd grab towels, and we didn't have a laundromat here, so my sister-in-law, Esther Miles, was doing my laundry until we got into our own house and got a washing machine. And one day she came up to get the laundry, and she said, "Rosalyn, have you been using those towels to wipe up the floor? They're terrible." And I said, "Yes, I did. I did. My ice pan overflowed, and I did." My husband was quite ingenious, and when he was a boy, he got tired of having to mop up the floor for his mother when he'd forget. So he drilled a hole in the floor down into the basement, and he had a container down there so the water would drip down into that container, and he wouldn't have to mop up the floor for his mother all the time. So I thought that was quite clever.
I mean, that's something that I've heard of ice boxes before, you know, and it never occurred to me that you'd have to get rid of the water.
Right.
Go.
Well, they had ice boxes that had a front door that you just pulled open, and the ice and the grocery would be in, and then they had one that was top loading, and so you had to pull it up and get your ice inside. They were very happily replaced by the electric refrigerator.
How many years did you live with an ice box when you got married here?
Actually, just while I was at that apartment. Then, as soon as our house was finished, Clarence had started building it when we got engaged. And but materials were very scarce. We had hardwood flooring, and he had to go to 10 different towns in the area to get 10 pounds of nails. Things were very scarce because of the war. We didn't have, we couldn't get doors, so we hung up curtains over the bathroom opening. And so we were only there, it was less than, I would say about 6 months that I lived in that apartment, and then we moved into our house on Burn Street, even though it wasn't completed as yet. But we were happy to move in there.
So did they keep the ice, you know, where they kept cutting the ice for a few years after that?
Yes, they still did, because there were a lot of people who did not have the electric refrigerators. My husband had worked in Detroit for a while, and he was able to get knew people there, and he was able to get us a refrigerator, but we were on a mailing list, a waiting list for quite a while to get the refrigerator.
Did you ever go out and see where they cut the ice?
Yes, it was down at Lake Charlevoix, and down by Round Lake, and they did have what they called the sawdust house there, and that sawdust did protect the ice from the heat. So it was all stored in there. And shortly after we got married, the next November, we had one of the worst snowstorms that we'd had, and all the jobs were closed down. So my husband got a job back cutting ice, fell on the ice and broke his ribs. So he was laid up for quite a while, but and there was no unemployment at that time, no funds of any kind. We had just to make do with what we had, and thank goodness we did have, pardon me, we did have some savings, although most of our savings had been put into the new house because we didn't want a mortgage on the house. We bought things as we could afford it, and as he could make the house, build the house, and he built it himself, except for digging the basement. But he did all the rest of the work himself, the wiring, the plumbing, everything. So.
How long was he out of work with the ribs?
Not too long. He was able to get a job up at Kate Carson Lumber Company, and worked delivering and working in the office and in the lumber room itself. So he wasn't out of work too long, but it was just long enough for us to really count our pennies. And of course, at that time, pennies counted a lot.
Did you have a baby at that time?
We had our first child right after he started working there, and then we had a second one within a year, and then 4 years later we had our daughter. We had 2 boys and a girl.
Well, that leads us to the next poem, which is about ice skating on Round Lake.
Okay.
That's on page 107.
I thought you might want my war poems. I didn't know.
Well, if there's one that you'd like to read, then
107.
we can do those too.
Okay. Do you remember ice skating on Round Lake? My husband remembered when he was a boy. They skated on Round Lake in Charlevoix. The winters were cold and oh so long, and the ice on the lake would be so strong. That skating there was done every night, but of course the ice back then was just right. With the below zero temps, it made good thick ice, and to go skating with your friends was really nice. The ice was usually at least 4 feet deep, and you didn't worry if it would keep. Sometimes you might hear a crackle or a crack, and the faint-hearted then would rush to go back. But with the ice that thick and the winter that cold, you knew it was safe and you could be bold. Some of the best skaters would hang on behind a car and skate clear to Ironton, even though it was far. But you had to be a really good skater, you see, if you could go that far, because then, you see, oh me, that to get back to Charlevoix, you might have to skate home, for sometimes there'd be a return car, and sometimes none. Not for the faint-hearted to skate that far, but the ice was thick enough for even a car. And it was a triumph to see who could keep it up, even though there was no award of a skating cup. Not like the thin ice made now by warmer days, when it's really safer to just stay away. It was really a great sport to do it back then, but I wonder if anyone will ever do it again.
That's quite something to go all the way to East Jordan.
Just to Ironton.
Just to Ironton.
But that was
okay.
enough.
Yeah.
So did you ice skate out there?
No, I was not a skater. Our winters in Atchison were so different than up here. We would have some cold weather and freezing, what we thought was freezing, and then a couple days later it was all melted again. So we had roller skating rinks instead of ice rinks like they did here. And when I moved up here, I tried to learn to ice skate, but I wasn't very successful. He was a great skater, and they used to play hockey. They had an ice rink down by the elementary school at that time. So when our children were just tiny, they both got ice skates, all three, and they learned to skate. And they were all very proficient at it.
What did you think? Were you able to adjust to the winters?
It was very difficult. At home, if we got to 0, that was cold, very cold. We did have snow enough that we had sledding parties and things of that sort. But up here, my first winter, it was 38 below. And I called my mother to tell her what it was like. And she said, "Rosalyn, that's not for you. Come on home." But I didn't. I wintered it out, and luckily we haven't had winters like that for a long time. We've had some real bad snowy winters, but not temperatures that deep anymore. I think about some of the winters that we had with so much snow that it was up to, my kids could stand on the snowbanks and touch the telephone wires without any trouble. We had that much snow. And one winter, of course, it was so bad that you couldn't see to drive any place. Yeah. And the next morning, they found one car buried under the snow, and other cars had been going over the top of him because they couldn't see him. They just thought it was another snowbank.
Oh, my goodness.
That's a true story.
That's amazing. Well, how about a couple of those World War II poems? And then I was thinking one I liked was the on ration stamps and
Ration
on
stamps?
silk hose.
Okay.
Would be great.
World War II ration stamps. To help with the war effort when things were high, they issued ration stamps to help us get by. All the products were going to the war effort, you see, and those left at home, like you and me, were required to sacrifice to help our boys at war. And we were glad to help. They were